Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. Even as the tensions between India and Pakistan rise high, following the dastardly attack on the Uri army base which resulted in the killing of 18 Indian soldiers, an interesting development is happening in Geneva. Following the recent decision of the Indian government to highlight the situation in Balochistan, the Baloch leaders have started looking at India for support and more. It may be recalled that Prime Minister Modi had in his Independence Day address referred to the human rights and other violations happening in Balochistan. In the light of this, Baloch leader in exile in Geneva, Brahumdag Bukti, has approached the Indian embassy there seeking asylum in India. He has also said that many other Baloch leaders also will be seeking asylum. So we will discuss today whether asylum should be provided to them and what would be the fallout of such action by India and what impact it will have on the Indo-Pak relations, and also how the international community will look at it. To discuss this, I have with me BP Singh, former Home Secretary, Government of India and also a former Governor, Rajiv Sikri, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, KTS Tulsi, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court and also an MP in the Rajya Sabha, and Vinod Sharma, Political Editor, Hindustan Times. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Singh, this whole concept of asylum, how is it that India doesn't have an asylum law as such, but we have been giving asylum to people in the past?
I must first say by the way of preamble that there is a great degree of consensus even within Pakistan and of course outside, that the policy of the Pakistani state in relation to tribal areas, particularly in Balochistan, has been a failure, and that there has been gross violation of human rights and denial of freedom. Now, placed in these circumstances, the policy that we have adopted in relation to our neighbors, whether it is in Tibet, whether it is in Bangladesh, whether it is in Sri Lanka, has been one of self-restraint. And Pakistan violated the 1947 agreement and forcibly went to occupy Balochistan and succeeded. But since then it has not adopted what I call the Nehruvian policy. In fact, it was a part of the constitutional policy which the Constituent Assembly in India had debated and given the tribal areas a kind of freedom. And it had adopted a committee for headed by Gopinath Bardoloy of Assam and Rupnath Brahmo, the tribal leader, and also a Christian leader. So this was a policy, and we succeeded in the northeast. We had not succeeded in Kashmir. Of course, we succeeded in Ladakh, we succeeded in Jammu, but not in the valley, largely because of the Pakistan state.
Not succeeded in what sense are you saying?
You see, the policy was of giving justice, giving human rights, guaranteeing freedom of expression, and giving them liberal doses of developmental funds, because we wanted the people to shape their own destiny through democracy. And democracy has taken roots in Kashmir, as it has taken the northeastern states, and the northeastern states are doing exceedingly well. Even in Kashmir, the standard of living of every citizen is much higher than in many parts of India. What I am trying to tell you is that the Pakistan's policy has been different, totally different. And therefore, after so many decades, about nearly 7 decades of repression in Balochistan, the Prime Minister has decided, and as you rightly mentioned in the beginning, to take interest, active interest in the affairs of Baloch people. And therefore, in this background, it will be in furtherance of the new Indian state policy to give Baloch leaders asylum. But it has to be a very deliberate policy. We have to see whether this will lead to expansion in the freedom of expression of the Baloch people. Will it lead to greater degree of protection of human rights of the Baloch people, or will it lead to a regime of repression? And it is in that broader context that we have to carry the leadership of Afghanistan, Iran and Russia in particular with the Indian leadership.
Okay, Mr. Sikri, do we have an asylum policy?
We have had a practice, even if there isn't a policy. And that practice starts actually with the asylum or the refuge given to the Parsis.
Okay.
Which was, they were being persecuted in Persia and they took refuge.
This is pre-independence.
Yes, yes, it goes there. Then you had in 1950 King Tribhuvan. He sought asylum in our embassy in Kathmandu. Subsequently, every political party or movement in Nepal, be it Nepali Congress or even the Maoists, have had some kind of a refuge in India.
Even the Afghan leaders.
Afghan leaders, Myanmar, Tibet, Dalai Lama and other the 120,000 or so people. Sri Lanka has been mentioned. Even Maldivian opposition leaders have had their say here. So India has always been a heaven for the persecuted. So I would like to see the move, I don't know what is going to be the decision, to consider the application of Bhukti in that broader historical background that India has always given refuge to persecuted peoples from all countries in our neighborhood.
On a case-to-case basis, virtually.
I don't think it's so much case to case. I think that there is also a general sentiment among public that so and so is being persecuted, so give our arms are open to these people. So I think that you have to see it not just in the context of government policy, but also public perception. Now, I mean, tomorrow, for example, if the government decides to change our policy on Tibetan refugees, I think there's a public reaction which we have to take into account. Even in 1959, there was a public reaction. So it is, I think, the Indian public policy also to give refuge or asylum to persecuted. And there is no doubt that there is persecution of the Baluchis. There is, of course, a political motive in this, which Mr. B.P. Singh has explained. So I think that if it is given, there is nothing wrong. We gave it to Taslima Nasreen also. So there is this whole history and background.
Okay. Mr. Tulsi? Mr. Tulsi, what is the legal position as far as asylum seekers are concerned? And also, does it, as we have seen, there is no policy, there is no law as such which gives the government of India the way how to approach these kind of issues. But incidentally, there was a private member's bill last year which I think Mr. Shashi Tharoor tried to bring in on this whole asylum issue. But what is the legal position?
You see, in the absence of any law, it is essentially a political decision. And I think the application or the request of Brahmdar Khan Bhukti deserves consideration, because there is a well-founded fear of persecution that he is facing, he and various other people. And India in the past also has granted asylum on this basis, fear of persecution. That's the ground on which Dalai Lama was given asylum. That's the ground on which Mujibur Rahman was given asylum in India. And various persons have been granted asylum. Even Julian Assange has been granted asylum in Ecuador, although the US Vice President called him a high-tech terrorist. And no one has declared Brahmdar Khan Bhukti a terrorist except Pervez Musharraf. And Pervez Musharraf himself is under an asylum from the British authorities because he is accused of being party to the conspiracy of murder of Benazir Bhutto. So he is himself an absconder, and he chooses to say that he is a terrorist. Well, that there are so many. Even the killer of Mujibur Rahman was granted asylum in the United States. That is Rashid Chaudhry. So the question is not as to what he is accused of. The question is whether he faces a well-founded fear of persecution. And if there is fear of persecution, then India is entitled. How can Pakistan talk about this to India when they have kept Dawood Ibrahim for all these years in Pakistan and has lent him protection and also all the facilities to carry on his nefarious activities? So therefore, there is no question of having any second thoughts about the role that Bhukti may be playing in Balochistan, but they are also fighting for their own survival.
Okay. Vinod?
And they are facing persecution.
Okay. Vinod, is Bhukti's seeking asylum, and the other examples which we have heard from our panelists, do you equate them?
Well, you see, we have been backing the Baloch nationalists not from now, but since the 50s. This is not a very well-known fact, but the
Not
reality,
as openly as
reality is that covertly we have been backing them since the 50s. And now that tactics has become overt. It's there on the table. What has brought it on the table? The issue of Kashmir, that we want to negate or dent the Pakistani campaign on human rights violations in Kashmir by flagging what they are doing in Balochistan and also to some extent in Sindh and to the minorities which are persecuted there. It was very clearly mentioned in the BJP manifesto that wherever the Hindus are persecuted, they shall be given refuge in India. Brahmadas Bhukti in that case would be an exception. That he doesn't, I mean, it is not for his faith, but it is for his nationalist pitch in his province of Pakistan. Now, there is a problem here. Problem is that while technically it's pretty fine that they raise an issue and you dent it by questioning their own track record on human rights, you may win an argument there. But our backing of the Baloch struggle would be akin to the Pakistani backing of Khalistan movement in the Punjab. Because Pakistan historically never had any territorial claim on Punjab. We don't have any territorial claim on Balochistan. And we don't have any contiguity with Balochistan also, because it's not a province which is bordering India. Unlike Nepal, which bordered India, Bangladesh, which bordered India, Tibet, which bordered India, we had those people here. Afghanistan was an exception, but we had Karzai and others here, but they were not exactly refugees. They had come here for studying and other purposes. Even Sheikh Hasina was here. So I think that this has to be thought through very carefully, because by implication, it legitimizes, for instance, Salahuddin being given refuge in Pakistan. Now, Salahuddin was a regular Indian politician who contested election on our side of Kashmir and who is now there. So I don't know whether the government has thought this through, but if there is a possibility of two sides negotiating and at some stage saying that, look, you back off from our part of the territory and we'll back off from your part of the territory. Now, this kind of a quid pro quo can be worked out at some stage whenever they are in a mood to talk. But right now, the message that is going across is that this is an Indian plan to dismember Pakistan the second time. Please understand this.
That is.
So, you see, we have dismembered Pakistan once by helping the Bangladesh struggle for the formation of Bangladesh. And the message which is going now is this is another Indian game plan to dismember Pakistan the second time.
Okay.
Now, I do not know whether we'd be able to handle that and which is the way forward that the government has decided to handle that.
So, Mr. Sikri, it's a tactical move. It's a tactical move, and it's a move which in these circumstances, in the present day circumstances, following what has happened in Uri and things like that, what do you expect the international response to be, the response to be from Pakistan itself?
No, the Pakistanis are of course going to be against it, but I see it more than a tactical move. After all, if the Prime Minister has from the ramparts of Red Fort talked about Balochistan, there has to be a thought out plan in this regard. And one is to turn the heat on Pakistan so that it is more preoccupied with its internal problems and therefore has less time and energy to create trouble for India. I think
As far as that is, no, I agree with that. I agree with as far as that. But getting these Baloch leaders into India
that's
as
all right. I don't see
asylum,
any. I don't see
would
any.
it be crossing a certain line
No,
and
I
creating
don't think,
problems?
No. I've given so many examples where we have done it in the past. As far as
No, but
this,
we didn't have this kind of a atmosphere at that point of time in most of the places when, you know, there was a direct confrontation between India and the other country.
No, that's all right. But as far as the point about dismembering Pakistan is concerned, I think that is a bridge too far. And even in the 50s, when Nehru decided to give asylum to the Dalai Lama, he made it very clear to him. He says, we will not fight your battles for you. You have to fight your own freedom struggle battles. And I think the Baluchis also have to give that same message, that if they want to break free, they have to fight their battles. India will not fight their battles. But as in the case of the Tibetans, by giving prominence to the Baluchi cause, you are keeping the cause alive. You are keeping the hopes alive of the Baluchi people. As for example, in the Tibetans, without the asylum, there would be no Tibetan question in the world. So similarly, now the Baloch question is coming up in the consciousness of the world as well as of the people of Balochistan, that there is some moral and other support. There is support in the United States already in certain sections. So I think that we have to see it in that, not the question of dismembering Pakistan. That, whether it happens or not, is something that Pakistan will do itself quite successfully.
Mr. Singh.
Yes.
Mr. Singh, no, the question is this. You know, how are you going to pull it off? How are you going to carry it off? As Vinod rightly points out, we have no claims as far as Balochistan is concerned. It is not a neighbor, you know, we don't have a common border with that. The other cases which
in terms of security implications, we don't have a claim.
We don't have a claim.
We can't say that there's something next door and we are affected.
Whereas in all other cases which we discuss, whether it's Bangladesh or Burma or Sri Lanka or whatever, we have, you know, border with them. So in this case, the question of how we, if this is to be taken up at an international forum by the Pakistanis, saying to just prove to the international community that, you know, India is trying to meddle in their affairs. How are you going to convince it?
Yes,
convince them?
I follow your question. You see, there are subtle legacies of British India from which we are suffering, from which other countries are also suffering. Now, the policy that we have promoted in dealing with the tribal societies is different than the policy which Pakistan has promoted. Now, it is not because of India that there is a Baloch crisis. It is because of Pakistan that there is a Baloch crisis. Our problem in Kashmir is not because of India, it is because of Pakistan, that despite the instrument of annexation having been signed in favor of India, Pakistan decided to send the Rajakars, the tribals, and capture a large part of Kashmir. Now, leave that. So, we have to understand that. Now, placed in these circumstances, look at it from the angle of Baluchis who are suffering. Where will they go? They will go to Afghanistan, who are their neighbors.
Why now? The question will be why now? It has been happening for the last 50 years.
I'm coming to that. Where will they go? Go to Afghanistan? Or will they go beyond Afghanistan to Iran? Will they go beyond that to Russia? These are the...
They are in Geneva now.
Yes, they are in Geneva.
Now.
That's what I'm saying. I'm coming to that. So, these are the geopolitical realities. So, they have escaped to Geneva. Now, the natural ally just now, in the political sense and also in the geostrategic sense, is India. And the Indian Prime Minister has taken the lead. And therefore, the question is to what extent we should go.
Exactly.
And there, if at some stage the government of India makes it clear, and I said in the beginning, consult these nation states, Afghanistan, Iran and Russia, besides other countries, but these four in particular, and then tell them very clearly that we are giving you asylum to give you safe haven, to survive. But a war cannot be fought from India, whether it is political
So
or
we are not going to
administrative.
fight your war.
No.
You take care of yourself.
I think that
Is that going to be a convincing argument?
No, I think, I have tremendous regard for Mr. Singh, and I respect him for his views, and he is a ready reckoner on so many historical facts, you see. But with all my respects, the argument that is just extended is very painstaking. We have not created problem in Balochistan. Yes, we haven't. But once we have them as refugees, we would be blamed for creating problem. And Balochistan, like we are telling them that you have Salahuddin sitting there, who's guiding the young boys, misleading the young boys in Kashmir, that we accuse them of giving refuge to Dawood, who's wanted for n number of acts of terrorism in India. Now, you see, the point here is that there was once a foreign policy that we shall not hyphenate ourselves with Pakistan. This is a clear and square hyphenation of India with Pakistan, that you are creating trouble in Kashmir and we are going to negate that, or we are going to sort of create a counter pressure point in Balochistan, which, you see, this was already there, Balochistan as a counter pressure point. I must take you down to recent events, Sharma el-Sheikh, where it found a mention in a joint statement. There was an uproar, that, oh, you've accepted your involvement in Balochistan. No, I think we have made a paradigm shift from there. No, fine, the government has a right to make a paradigm shift in foreign policy. They are the best judges, they have the information on the strength of which they take decisions. We can't question them without that information at our command. But at the same time, we'd like to know as to what is the way forward and to what extent this policy can take us in neutralizing the Pakistani involvement in Kashmir.
Mr. Sikri, I would like you to answer that. Before that, let me get Mr. Tulsi. This has to be thought through, and in the absence of a law, in the absence of any regulations, how do we do that? And withdrawing of asylum, is it as easy as giving an asylum?
Of course. If there are any number of precedents all over the world, the question is, it's a humanitarian gesture. When there is well-founded fear of persecution.
No. Sorry to
humanitarian grounds, you are granting asylum and no more.
Mr. Tulsi, sorry to intervene. No, in what you say, that it's a humanitarian gesture, fine. In the normal context, it would be acceptable. But in the present context, in the present atmosphere, which were between the two countries, would that be looked at just a humanitarian gesture, or it's a political, as you rightly said earlier, it is a political decision?
Merely because of the problems between the two countries, it doesn't mean that his fear of persecution is not well founded. That's the relevant consideration. And that's a consideration on the basis of which even known terrorists have been granted asylum by the United States, by United Kingdom. And whatever their relationship between the countries is a different matter. I don't think we should mix up too much of the problems between the two countries in Kashmir with this issue. This issue is to be judged on its own merit, and that is there a well-founded fear of persecution or not? And if there is, I think India needs to come to the aid of such a person.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Sikri.
Well,
the point raised by Vinod. I'll come to you, sir.
The way forward, I don't think you can expect the government to spell it out in public, nor is the end game necessary.
What do you think is the way forward?
I think that you keep the Baluchi cause alive. If this is a change from the traditional policy, it is because I see this government willing to take risks and take position with a certain boldness. I don't believe that we have in the past extended support to the Baluchis. Mr. Sharma thinks we have. I don't think that we have. And I think many of the Baluchis feel that if we had, then they might have achieved something. But Baluchistan was never a part of Pakistan. Before India and Pakistan became independent, it was an independent state which was recognized as such by Pakistan. And in March 1948, the Baluchis appealed to India to join the Union. And there was an AIR broadcast which was there. I think VP Menon said it, and then it was denied. And 1 or 2 days later, the Pakistani army went in. So I think that if it is a case of Pakistan having annexed an independent state of Baluchistan, and Kalat was also recognized as an independent state by the British in the way that Nepal was, it was not one of those princely states, then I think that the situation in Baluchistan, as far as Pakistan is concerned, is a little tricky. And they have to deal with this situation. They have the whole history of Baluchistan will come out now, and the illegality. After all,
no, sir, how do you compare that with, say, Pakistan's demand on Kashmir? As we rightly pointed out, Baluchistan, we have no connection with Baluchistan. We have no common boundary with Baluchistan. We have all these years never raised that issue. Now, what is the and then giving asylum and talking about their problems, internal problems, aren't these two different issues, or are they related?
No, look, even if it is not a neighboring country, there is a problem. I want to compare with Tibet. What is the fundamental problem between Tibet and China? China invaded Tibet, which was viewed as an independent country. And the Tibetans do not accept, even to this day, that Tibet was always a part of China. Similarly, the Baluchis do not accept that they were ever a part of Pakistan. There is a similarity to that.
Okay. Yes.
I must tell you that when you see Baluchistan issue in an isolated context, then India has to climb down from that high pedestal. But in geopolitics, in diplomacy, when you are dealing with an intransigent neighbor, which only believes in terrorist method of dealing with you,
using this as a tactical strategy,
I think so.
Is something which is allowed in international politics. Is that what you're saying?
In international politics, much worse is allowed. But then for India, it will be just climbing down from that high pedestal of Gandhi and moral ground.
Very quickly, Vinod, completely out of time.
I know that there are certain similarities between the province of Balochistan and Kashmir, but it is also a fact that the Khan of Kalat finally gave in. And this dispute is not pending in the United Nations. There is no resolution in the United Nations regarding Balochistan.
We will not go
so there is
into
a distinction.
There is,
so you see, when we are discussing a serious issue, we must
asylum
discuss
to
it.
Bukti.
Asylum to Bukti could have been possible even in Switzerland, where he is living currently, or any other Western country.
Why India?
Why is it that India? So that raises questions.
Okay.
So that is where we are debating this here.
Oh, exactly. So it raises questions. Those questions needs to be answered. Obviously, the Indian government will have to answer it. We'll wait and watch what kind of decision they will take finally on this issue. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.